Welcome to the Lift Podcast, the first one.
Hey.
We are live on
Go.
the first one. We did it. It took a lot to get here. Thank you, Than, in the background, for getting us to this point. But we're on the podcast. I'm Paxton. I'm the Student Ministries Director at High Point. I'm joined by Matt and Lexi. You guys want to introduce yourselves, say a little bit about yourself before we get going?
I'm Lexi. I'm on staff.
Yes, you are.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I'm just a kid. I'm a sophomore dude.
Sophomore
Yeah.
dude. There you go.
There we go.
Nice. Well, what do you want to talk about today, Matt?
What's the question?
That's a good question. What is the question?
I think you're supposed to know the
Wait,
question
No, I don't know
before
how
you
to word
go.
what is the actual question?
I think the question you told me was that we were going to talk about why do we have Christianity at all? Or how is Christianity the best answer to the human condition? Which is a pretty brainy
That's like-
question, but that's what I think you
It's
asked.
like kind of deep.
It is pretty deep, but you're pretty deep. So
Oh.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yikes. Spice
All
it
right.
up.
So do you have any initial thoughts on that? Or what did you find when you were looking into that?
Or what prompted the idea?
Well, so considering the fact I was reading through, C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, and I was like halfway
As one
through.
does.
Yeah, naturally. I was just like reading through, and I felt like it covered a lot of. This is why we need to here's why God exists. This is this stuff, and then the thought that was coming to me was like, well, why do we need Christianity? Why are we not like just Muslims?
Hmm.
Why are we Christians and not Muslims? Like,
Hmm.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like what's the differentiating factor for Christianity versus some other religious faith?
Yeah. So
Nice.
like, sure, like under the understanding that there's a God, we need to be saved. Why do we need to be saved by Christianity? Like, why do we need Jesus? Like, why can't we just like do a bunch of good things and be saved by like follow the Old Testament law and be saved by Judaism?
Hmm. That's a good question.
That is good.
Do you want me to answer it, or are you going to answer it?
Why don't you take a shot?
All right, because you did all the research, so I'm probably going to be embarrassed by you, but I'll try my best.
That's all right.
Yeah, for me, when I think about the Christian faith and comparing it specifically to like other works-based faiths, which I think most other faiths, Islam included, are works-based. Like if you do more good than bad,
Yep.
you'll be saved. And I think a lot of faiths are like that. Even Hinduism, in the karma system, like you get reincarnated higher up if you do more than good. And the fundamental truth, I think, is that everybody, and I'd say even all people, have not done more good than they have done evil. So it's not going to work out for you if that's the system that you operate on. Like even when I do good, and most everybody would consider themselves to be a good person, I think. But for myself, when I look at even the good things that I've done, oftentimes I'm not even doing them for like the right reasons, like truthfully, like in my deepest place in my heart. Because even when I like serve people, I'm doing it maybe because it feels good for me or what have you. I might not have the best interest in mind. So even the good I do might not be enough to get me into heaven. And that is to say even that God, if there is a God who's all righteous and judges fairly, I don't understand how he could overlook murder even if I had done like a million good things. Like no, in our today, even if I was talking to you and I killed your dog or something really bad,
That's so
something
No.
really sad like that, like John Wick, if I did that, no, his dog died in the movie.
Why are we talking about John
Well, that's
Wick?
what happened, and he got really mad. And he was like, "No matter what these Russian guys do to make it up to me, I am not going to let it go." And God is the same way. I think, like God, why would God forgive the wrongs you've done based on the good you've done? Like in the legal system, we don't do that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like,
We just put you in jail.
Yep.
yeah,
and
if you
that's
kill
'cause-
someone, it's not like, well, I helped the old lady cross the street. Oh, you're not guilty.
Yeah, no, that's not how it works. Like if you do something wrong, you deserve a just punishment, and you can't work your way out of it by doing other things. And no one who, like, if someone wronged me, you could maybe do recompense, like, and like pay me back over time. But like that doesn't make the wrong thing you did okay. Like I don't forget that you did that, and I'm probably gonna still want justice. Like in places where there is the death penalty, people who have their family wronged by somebody else are not going to pursue like, oh, that guy should be able to do community service for 40 years.
Yeah.
They're like, that person killed my father, and so he should die. And I think it's the same with God. He says he looks at the good things we've done, and for one, there's not that many, I think, if we're honest. And for two, a just God can't just overlook sin.
Yeah.
And be like, they did enough good, so we're going to let it go. There has to be something that stands in for us that removes the impurity about us when we are doing things that are wrong and hurting other people. And I think most other religions don't have a mechanism for that. What are your thoughts? That was a long form answer.
Yeah, it's all right. So it almost seems like if I chose to like, man, I don't really think Christianity's it, and try to be saved by some other religion. No, like really, it wouldn't matter because I'm not gonna get saved by that religion. If I chose, I like to be saved by this one. Doesn't matter because it's not gonna save me.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Jesus is pretty explicit that he is the one gate into heaven. And I think it is because he is the one person who gave us an atoning sacrifice, not just telling you to do more, which is a part of the faith, is like responding to what Jesus did by living a loving life and living a new life for God. But first, we had to be reconciled with God because Jesus paid the price for our sin. So he wipes us clean first, which I don't think other religions really have a mechanism for.
Yeah.
They don't.
Well, there are some that do, but none that are like grace-free. They're all like works-based. So like in Islam, you can travel to Mecca and do a bunch of rituals to be wiped clean of all your sin, in theory. That's a mechanism of Islam, but still that involves traveling to Mecca and doing all the works. So it is works-based still. And it's only in Christ that God truly gets all the glory because he's the one who does all the work for us. He just says you have to believe I've already suffered for you and I've loved you first, so respond. And I think that's different. And I think most people live with guilt about the things they've done wrong to people, whether you call it sin or not. They have that guilt, and you need to know that that's been forgiven between you and God.
Yeah. It was like I was watching some videos last night, and I came across one that had John Lennox in it.
Oh,
And
he's so
like,
good.
It was so funny because he compared our salvation compared to other religions. Like he's like, I was gonna get married to my wife, and I brought her a present, and it was a cookbook, and I said, on page 147, you'll find like so and so recipe. If you follow these laws, which are the instructions for the like making the recipe, if you do that for 40 years, then I'll marry you. If not, you can go home to your mother.
Oh my goodness.
But in actuality, that's like what other religions are. But like what it really is for Christianity is, here, I'll marry you because you already have my acceptance. You'll make the recipe for me.
That's
I
good.
thought that was hilarious. But
That is hilarious.
I think that's kind of how other religions versus Christianity, we don't like try and have to earn our salvation because like obviously we talk about it wouldn't work because we obviously cannot do that. It would be
Obviously. We are
pointless to
fleshly.
try.
Yeah, and we say obviously because we're all Christian, but like I think even if you're not there yet, like and you're
Hopefully.
listening to this and you're like, well, maybe I could earn my salvation somehow. I think you only need to like look inward for a little bit to be like, man, when I do all the good things, do I feel like I'm justified by the things I've done? And I think if you're honest with yourself, you can keep doing more and more, but you're never going to feel that peace with God that I think us three feel because we know it's not about the works that we do. We don't have to earn it. And I think it's a really hard place for someone to be like, man, like an Islamic person, we're picking on them a lot right now, but
So sorry.
it's only because
Sorry, guys.
only because I know more about it. If you're an Islamic person, you don't ever know if you're going to get to heaven for sure. You know, you could say, I think my good deeds outweigh my bad deeds. I've done most of my due diligence. I'm trying, but I don't know. I don't have that security. And that produces a lot of anxiety, I think. And there's a security in being a Christian that I think people need to operate. Like we live in a time where people are so anxious about everything.
Yes.
And we need that security in knowing that we're right with God, that Jesus has purchased, not based on what we do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
I would also add that in Christianity, Jesus is the only one that's like a God or Christ that actually dies for the people that he loves. So like in Islamic like culture or like other religions, they don't die for their people, like the gods or whatever. So I would also argue that that's another reason to be a Christian is God laid his life down for us before giving, like, wanting all this other stuff, I guess.
Yeah, God doesn't need us.
He doesn't need us, but he wants us. He wants that relationship with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. That's
I feel like we've done a good job of painting why we can't be saved by other religions, but like, say, like still, like if I was like a Jew and that I was like, why it doesn't matter if I can't get saved by Judaism, why am I not still a Jew? Like, even if I theoretically could be saved by Christianity, how do we know that's true? Like, it's the true like religion. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we talked about this recently at Lyft, that there's, I think, two ways to think about affirming your faith. I think one is experiential, which is important, and I think the other is intellectual. And I think Christianity stands up in both cases, that it has a really strong intellectual foundation.
Right.
And it also has a really solid experiential aspect to it that we can all have and experience. So that's a good question. I was going to ask you, and I think you told me to ask, what's the most convincing intellectual thing for you that Christianity is the faith that is real? And then what also is the most convincing emotional or experiential aspect of the faith that's convinced you that Christianity is real?
Well, I'll start with experiential. I mean, this is like the classic like baptism testimony thing. We're like, well, I didn't do drugs. I was a good like.
Yeah,
Sunday
you
kid.
behaved
That was my
yourself
life. But
pretty
like,
good.
I never had like a radical turnaround as a slow thing. But it's like when I hear like stories, like you hear about these people that just get like flipped like that, and like obviously we know that you can't just do that to yourself without something outside of you. Like I couldn't just like decide one day like I'm done with all these temptations and addictions. Like I'm just turning it around. We know that that's not how the brain works.
That is not how it works.
Yeah. And then you don't hear that about like you weren't like going around. You're like this atheist became a Jew and he's like I just had this like now I just know I need to serve God. Like I didn't really hear those. So that was like convincing to me. It's like, well, if you don't really see these changes, and you see what the changes in Christian, like people that become Christians, which is what Jesus promises, like you like are a new person.
Yeah, you
It's
live a
pretty
new
convincing.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen that in your own life, you're saying, or in other people
In
too,
just
or
other
both?
stories, like
Oh, okay, both.
especially like hearing testimonies and a bunch of other stories. Like I said, I've been like, I got a little.
You've
slow-
always
a
been
slow
on
ascent.
good ascent.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, hey, I mean
Just
that in itself is
been a little
testimony
angel.
too.
I
mean-
good job staying a little angel.
Yeah, that's still good though. I mean, I often think about like my story. I was also on that same track up until college and then kind of faded away from the faith for a while and then came back around. And when I was younger, I kept saying to myself, man, my story's so lame. I hope one day I'll be like dramatic, like the people who were telling their testimonies on stage.
Should get into
Be
a
like,
bunch of
I need to go
sins.
get into some problems. Yeah, like my life's too good. And then I did, and it's not all that it's chalked up to be. So
That's
you
so
should-
true.
you should.
I remember when I was like 5 and I prayed for that. I don't know why I prayed for my life to be a
Lord,
mess.
give me a dramatic,
works.
moving testimony.
God, how am I gonna bring people to Jesus if I haven't been a wreck? What am I gonna do?
Exactly.
But it's like also beautiful to like
Yeah.
to live a life where you followed God the whole way is also a beautiful testimony and like shows that the Holy Spirit is operating perhaps even more powerfully because he kept you on the track the whole time when you were a silly young person. Not that you're a silly young person,
No, I'm a
but
silly young person.
we're all honestly
I'm a
on
sophomore
our
dude.
average
Still
age
young.
on this average age on this is low.
It's about silly young
Sub
age.
20, I think.
Probably.
So, yeah,
That's funny.
we're all silly young people together.
We're just little.
But we're trying to
Yeah.
follow Jesus, so that's good.
Let's go.
What about you, Lexi? Was there an experience you had when you were like, oh, this Christianity thing, this is legit?
Yes. So when I was in Belize, I was in like sophomore, junior year of high school. Freshman year I fell away from the Lord and then started to come back. I got kicked out of my youth group. And then I started coming back and I went on a mission trip. And have you guys ever heard like the term like reading someone's mail? You ever heard of that?
Like going through their mailbox.
is that
and,
like knowing
reading
someone-
their letters?
Like, okay, so, like-
information?
Yes. Like God will literally give them like the information that you had told no one, and God just like reveals it to them, and then they tell you back it, and you're like, how did you know that? that happened to me in Belize. So I was like, all right, I understand, Lord. You exist. And that's where it turned around.
Wow.
Not fully, but that's where the journey started.
That's so cool. And
It was
that's
fun.
I love that about the Christian faith is like I hear more and more I hear like these miraculous stories.
It's
And
cool.
like that's real. Like that
Yeah.
isn't that so cool that that's like
yeah.
there's like a real tangible like spiritual supernatural aspect to the Christian faith.
Yeah, and then like miracles as well. Like you know, like
Yes.
brings out like tangent, but like with like you don't hear like as many like you'll see, like have people praying for a sick person. Like all of a sudden they're like, oh, well your tumor's not here anymore. Like, oh yeah, that arm you
Yes.
had amputated. Well, you woke up and it's there again. Like
Wow.
I'd
I've
love
never-
to see one of those.
I've
That'd be
never-
so cool.
I have not
heard.
heard
I
about
think
the
someone like
amputation one.
regrew their leg. Or something
Yeah,
like that, and it was
I've heard
completely
about
crazy.
that. I've heard about that, but I've never seen it. I want to see
Well,
it so bad.
I haven't seen any of them, but
Yeah, not yet.
Hey,
I
we're
have
still
seen-
young.
I can imagine it.
Exactly.
I have seen
So
I have heard
cool.
I have met people who have been healed by God.
Yeah.
And I believe them like
Mm-hmm.
wholeheartedly. And I've seen people come into rooms and be prayed for and walk out where they came in with a walker and they walk out without one.
Yeah.
So I've seen
Mhm.
it, and I'm convinced. I used to be really skeptical about healing. I used to be kind of a cessationist. Is that what that's called, Dan? Yeah, cessationist. I used to kind of
That's
be
so
like,
sad.
not well. I wasn't super sure, but I was like, I just hadn't seen any like miraculous things happen. So I was like, maybe.
It was one of those things where it's like you're like
Well, I was
you're
like,
sick and you're like, God heal me, and then you got better. You're like, well, it's because I took vitamin C.
well, there's that too for
That
sure.
happens all
Like
the
you ask for God to do something, and then afterward you're like, it was probably me.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
but
that's
this
kinda-
time you have
muscled my
to.
way through that.
Okay, there's like this really funny meme. I think it's a Garfield meme. It's really funny, but it's like, or maybe I don't know. Maybe it's a Charlie Brown. I don't remember.
Love
But it's a meme, and it's like when people pray for cake, and God gives them all the tools they need. They give them like dough, and an oven, and a pan, and some oil, and batter, and whatever, and they
God, why
don't
didn't you
do
give me
anything
a
with it.
cake?
Exactly, and it's like He's giving you the tools. Why not like actually go through
Or they-
and do it?
The other side
Make
of that
it.
is they see it all and then they make the cake and they're like, I did that.
Or
That was me.
that's true. Or have you
God, why
seen
did
like
help
the
me out? I
picture?
needed to see that.
Have you seen the picture of the guy who has like a hat on backwards and like sunglasses like right here, and he's going like this in the
Yeah.
sun, and he's like, and it's like, guys, God has given you so many tools, use them.
Mm,
It's so funny.
yeah.
How did we get on that?
I don't.
It's just God's actively supernaturally moving. So like if you're
Yes.
interested in the supernatural, you're listening, like you should explore the Christian faith because that's happening. And you should
That's
ask.
true.
Demons being casted out.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen that either. Like, but that's like I used to not believe in that. I swear, I used to be like God could do that, but I'm not sure He's still doing that, or He may not do that for me, or whatever. But I've seen it. I'm like, man, that's an element.
I've heard stories.
That's I think
It's
that's
pretty
happening.
cool.
Yeah,
I've seen YouTube
from
videos.
people who like
That'd be scary.
from like it's one of those things where you like hear one story and you're like, well, they might have misunderstood what happened there. You
He
hear
might
two,
have just been a little sick.
yeah, they might have been a little sick in the brain, and then you hear two and you're like, oh man,
Yeah.
and you trust these people and you're like, they wouldn't lie to me about this, so I know they perceived it this way, and then you hear like the sixth story, and you're like, okay, not
Something
everybody
tells me that God might be.
yeah, something is going on here. So there's that. For me, I also have the transformation story. Like when I was really struggling with depression when I was in college, like bad. And I went to the counselor because this was when I had walked away from faith and was not going to the right things to get joy or happiness. And it was rough. But I went to a secular counselor and he was like, man, you got severe depression. You need to be medicated. And honestly, you're never going to get better. Like you're just going to have to deal with it.
Sad.
Well, I mean, and part of that is still true. Like I'm not depressed anymore. That's spoilers. So
Woo!
God,
Spoiler.
I then came at, all right, I'll tell it in the chronological
Spoiler,
order.
I
So
got
I was like,
better.
man, I'm so sad. I'm going to be stuck with this forever, but I didn't want to live on medication.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that's just not real.
Mhm.
So I was like, at that point I had tried pretty much everything. I'd been doing meditation and partying and all trying all the things to just making it worse. And so I was like, I should just go back to Christianity because I had realized by that point that I had never really fully tried it. And maybe that's some people listening, like if you really tried Christianity, really believed it, or you're just kind of like going through the motions. That was me. I'd been going through the motions. And then I really was like, I'm going to give my life to God. And
Mhm.
as I did that, like it took probably like 6 months of me like giving things over to God, but my depression got better like over that period.
That's
And I
amazing.
did not need to be medicated. So like that was a total transformation of my life. And
That
I've
could be a
seen
medical mirror.
it could be a medical miracle, but it doesn't really, I don't really care if it's confirmed or not. Cause to me, I'm like, to the world, they were like, well, this guy, he's going to
Mhm.
need to be medicated the rest of his life. He's never going to get over this. And I saw the transformation in my own life. And to me, I was like, man, this is God doing that. It's not a coincidence, I don't think. And that's just one story. Like, that's the thing is like, if you ask God to show himself to you,
He will.
He will. And so you should be scared to ask for one because it'll change your life. But for two, he's gonna
But it'll
keep
change your
doing
life for the
that.
better.
And now it's like I see that stuff in other ways, like maybe smaller ways, maybe bigger. Like that's one story. But the
Yeah.
more you see, it just strengthens your faith more and more. Like I keep on seeing that stuff.
Gotta keep your eyes open.
Yeah, well,
Exactly.
and yeah, you gotta be willing to see it. Like
Yeah.
not be.
And you
like-
got to ask for it too.
yeah.
Ask and you will seek. I'm pretty sure is what it says in the Bible.
Oh yeah. Ask and you will receive.
Receive.
Seek and you will find.
Seek. Yeah.
Knock
there you
and
go.
the door will be opened.
Knock and the
Exactly.
door will be open.
So you just
Yeah.
gotta knock.
Ooh.
See
Yeah,
what
that's a good one.
the Lord's gonna knock down
Yeah, and so
in your view.
I was telling one of my close friends the other day, it's one thing to like be seeking God and be unsure about where he is and you're not sure what you believe yet, but I totally disagree with the idea that you could say, well, it doesn't really matter to me if God exists and I'm not going to ask him to show himself to me. But if he shows up, great, I'll interact with him. Like God's not going to do that. God's not going to just like you're not going to just stumble into God. You're going to have to seek him or he's going to like really get in your face. Like that's what happens to
With
people.
Saul.
Like if you're walking away from him, he's going to probably punch you in the face to get your attention.
Yes, I love it when the Lord just slaps me in the face. It's so nice.
I
like
mean,
it
my
if he would
favorite.
just kind of
Loving.
like pick me up and turn me around, maybe. That'd be
Yeah.
fun.
I like
Yeah.
a slap in the face. It
I mean,
helps me
he's
learn.
well, he's going to do what he has to do to get your attention.
Exactly.
So if
Slap
you
in the
need a
face.
whoops, you're just stubborn, I guess, and so
Yes.
you need the slap in the face.
Yes. very much.
Matthew's, already going the right way, so you just need
Oh, boy.
gentle pushing in the right
Guys,
direction.
I'm not a perfect person.
Ouch.
No, but he's gonna get your attention if you're not looking for him. I guess if he chose you, but I think he's the punishment of God sometimes is that he gives you over to what you're pursuing,
Mhm.
and that's the slap in the face. Like for me, when I
Hmm.
walked away from the faith and went to partying, God was like, "It's open to you, man. Go ahead." And I
Yeah.
destroyed my life, and then I was like, "Oh, I got to go back to God."
Yeah, it's like,
Interesting.
it says somewhere in like one of Paul's letters, right, where he's like
He will
talking
give
about
you
how
over
they,
to
they
sin.
will
Yeah.
turn you over, and then just they had all the sins that they fell into.
Yeah, I mean that's in the Old Testament too. I mean, God lets the Jewish people stray, and then they get their butts handed to him, and they come back to him. But I think that's because he knows that's what needs to happen for them to come around.
Mhm.
So he's doing the loving thing and doing that. Is there any intellectual things that persuaded you, big time?
I know you
Intellectual
don't wanna hear
arguments.
that.
Lexi's got one, I think, in the back.
I don't like using my brain.
That's not
No,
true.
nonsense.
All right, my favorite argument is the historicity of the resurrection, which is
like
best done, I think, by the minimal facts argument by some guy named Gary Habermas, I think. We'll
Hopefully.
see. Than didn't wave me down, so I think that's right. But it basically just says that there are minimal facts like that all people agree on, even if they're like secular historians, people who are really opposed to the resurrection of Jesus and
You'd have to be a
Christianity.
fool to
Yeah,
try
well,
and
they
argue
just
them.
the
They're
historical
just
evidence, the manuscript evidence is there, and among those facts is like that the Jesus died on the cross, that
Mhm.
people believed they saw him after he was allegedly killed, that people who believed in in Jesus died saying that they believed in Jesus and that he had rose from the dead, and so and there's a few other ones, but the point of the facts is just that the people who died declaring Jesus to be risen from the dead, it's pretty much indisputable from a historical perspective. And the best way to explain that is that Jesus did in fact rise from the dead. Because the other explanations for it are like that
get
they
hyped
all
about it.
hallucinated that Jesus had risen from the dead.
It's such
or
a good
that-
argument.
Well, I mean, it's the best one that they have. Like, I'm not
Doesn't
even
it make
trying to make
sense?
a strong
Does.
man or something.
Especially with that video, it makes it 100% clear
Oh,
why
video.
they would think it's a hoax.
Yeah. So
Totally understandable.
they try to explain with hallucination or that the disciples hid the body, some conspiracy
I
theory,
think
or
hallucinations are also
that Jesus did in fact survive. But all these explanations just don't add up in light of the facts that no one can dispute. And so I think that's a really strong argument. I like the cosmological argument too, that basically anything that begins to exist has a cause. That's actually a different one, but the point is the universe began to exist. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Therefore, the universe has a cause. I think that one's pretty solid too, and that cause has to be outside the universe. So it has to be timeless, spaceless, all-powerful, personal to make decisions.
guys, it must be the Big Bang.
Well, the Big Bang can't have made itself, right? So
Right.
that is the point of the argument. So if you believe the universe began to exist, which most people today do, if you believe in the Big Bang and that sort of thinking, then you have to believe that something caused that. So
Right.
I think that's a solid argument as well. I love the moral argument too, but I won't
Yeah.
get into that one at this point. I'll let you
That one's pretty
throw one in there.
intellectual.
You got any other ones, or you?
Those are usually the ones that those are really the only ones I needed to.
Well,
be
that's the thing
convinced.
is like
They're-
any one of them
Yeah.
is, if any one of them is right, and there's like 5 I think that Bill Craig defends. If anybody wants to look him up, reasonablefaith.org. If any of them are true, the result is that God exists, and he presents 5 that I think are all very solid. And so intellectually, you've got the historical arguments for the resurrection are really good. You got intellectual, philosophical arguments that are really solid, and you have the credibility of Scripture. Like the Bible, as far has been under intense textual criticism for a long time, like hundreds of years, and it is only shown that the Bible is one of the most best preserved documents that we have
Yeah.
from ancient times. And in light of those facts, you certainly do not have to leave your brain at the door to be a Christian. I think, in
Yeah.
fact, if you're paying,
It's a big
if you're
misconception.
intellectually looking at what's going on, I think you'd be
Not
persuaded. Well, that's the thing, is both. Whether you're looking at it
You
intellectually
don't have to
or
be
experientially.
intellectual to have faith in Jesus, because I am not intellectual
We also
whatsoever.
don't have to have emotions.
Well, that's right. And that's the thing is like,
That's
if I
true.
tell
It's
you,
both together,
yeah, if
you
I
have
say,
to be willing to like actually read the Bible and do the research and get to know God. But there's also that like relationship side where you actually have to spend time with Jesus and get to know Jesus.
that's
and
true.
Actually have faith.
Yeah, and
I don't
believing
know.
the,
To believe in
believing
Jesus.
the cosmological argument would not save you.
Yeah.
That's fair. You have to
That's very true.
be in love with Jesus.
It's not like I would the reason I know I'm
It can
friends-
convince you to have a relationship with
Right.
Jesus, but it's not gonna. Okay, you'd have to go straight to the Bible, cause see. So when you go straight to the Bible, it tells you, oh, okay, so I have to have a relationship with Jesus and actually pursue Jesus and try to get the fruits of the Spirit. That's what's gonna get you closer to Jesus and to actual Christianity. Like these are good points to help you like get to the terms that Jesus is real. But there's also that step further.
Yeah, like
that you
I
have to
could
go
do a
to.
bunch of research on finding out if my friend is real.
But that doesn't make you a Christian.
But like the reason I know I have a relationship with him is because
You spend time with them.
I spend time with him and I love him, and that's
Exactly.
how it works.
Yeah, you could be just as right. Like if I told you, like, hey, I don't know, the wall outside is painted blue, and you went out and you verified by like under a microscope looking at the wall, and like you observed it, and you took a sample, and like you did all these things to the wall to figure
That's
out
pretty
it was blue.
difficult. I could just look.
You
at
could
it.
do all that.
Really?
Well, that's or you could just believe me that it's blue, and you would be just as right. If you just believed my testimony, and that's really
That's
what
true.
the apostles are asking us to do. Is like you believe what I say, you can be just as right as William Lane Craig, who's spent his whole life doing
Right.
arguments for God. But you could just be a guy who's like, yeah, I read the Bible and I believe it, and you get the same result as Bill Craig. So it's really, I think, most people, frankly, hide behind the intellectual arguments and say, hey, I don't believe in God because the problem of evil or because of, of evolution or whatever the case may be. They say that, but I think most people, if they're honest, and if you do address their concerns that are intellectual correctly, it comes down to an emotional problem with God. Like that, why did God allow X to happen to me in my life? Or how can God be Lord and Savior of these people if, these other religions claim to do the same thing? Like they have these concerns that are more emotional and personal. And that's where it's more important, like when we're evangelizing people, that we're actually their friend. And we can't just, shout arguments at people, but we have to walk alongside them. And
There has to be a
Love them.
relationship there. They have to know that they can trust you.
Right. And you need to show them who Jesus is by the way you act, which is why
Exactly.
we need the power of the Spirit and need to actually pursue Him
Yes.
and grow in the faith.
Like that super corny quote. That's like, people don't like care how much you know unless they know how much you care.
That's so
I
true,
love
though.
that one 'cause
But it's
like,
so
easy to
true.
remember, 'cause it's
Because,
the same
okay,
thing.
I remember, like, the first week I came to youth group, and Paxton was like, if you actually, like, show someone, like, with your body language that you care, they will open up to you if you ask them to.
Right.
But if you don't, they're not going to. They'll be like,
Mhm.
oh, yeah, I'm fine, and walk away. But if you show that intentionality, then they'll actually open up.
Mm-hmm. It's true. That's a Mike Beresford quote.
Ah, thanks, Mike.
Yep, he's pretty smart. All right, well, I think we should wrap it up here just for sake of time. We got to get in the lift. But if you were listening to this and you're like, man, that was so cool. Matthew's awesome. I want to be like him.
Bro.
We're all like him. We all agree.
How about you want to be like Jesus?
Yes, let's
You're
be
gonna
like
get
Jesus.
nowhere if you try to be like any of us.
That's fair. Yeah.
Be like
Maybe you're
Jesus.
like, you
He's
see
better than-
Jesus in Matthew.
Except
And you're like, man, I want to be on a podcast. You can totally come. And it doesn't matter if you're a Christian. Like, it's great that we had Matthew on here. But I would love it if we had some people on here asking hard questions. And
It'd be fun.
that'd be
Come with
great.
your
But
fists.
I'd also love to talk about like movies and Star Wars. So if you're interested in hopping on the podcast,
Yes.
let us know. Well, because
Let's
one
just
of
talk
one of
about it
the
right now.
one of the students said that they were going to tell me about how Star Wars related to Christianity and faith, and I was like,
They
"All right, I'm
don't.
totally down. Well,
I'll be the devil's advocate on that one. It
We'll see.
doesn't.
But anyway, thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah.